So it's been over a year since HBO Max officially launched, and it's been a ride to say the least. A year ago, a friend and I were heaping praise onto the new Looney Tunes shorts, and that was sweet, but since then I haven't seen much notable homegrown animation pop up on the service. Most of their draws that bring people to the animated library, Close Enough, Distant Lands, even Rick and Morty, is content that was already earmarked for other networks and such. Right now, there are 3 cartoons original to HBO Max that are generally part of Cartoon Network's new generation. Stemming from the Adventure Time lineage, Summer Camp Island was pre-established a while ago, and while pretty unassuming, it continues to offer up something new and expansive each season. Stemming from the Uncle Grandpa line, Tig and Seek usually draws people in with its character interaction, which, while not for everyone, is a consistent draw. The third entry is a bit of an enigma. I think of it as the secret fourth flavor of Cartoon Network properties. On the whole, it'd be hard to find something like it in current year, but once you get a hold of it, you truly learn how much it dominates. What's it called? Simple.
We are the Fungies, prehistoric fungi in a mushroom town.
For reasons we'll tackle later on, I totally understand why A, you wouldn't be aware of this series, and B, you probably wouldn't pick it from a lineup. It's one of the comfiest shows around, even though it managed to be released while we were dealing with all manner of divine punishment outside. And in spite of that, I think it's more pertinent to have something like the Fungies around now more than ever. Ergo, I felt like I had to spit some bars about it. I have a lot to say, but moreover, I'm hoping whatever I throw out there can help you gravitate towards this series just a little bit more. There's startlingly little coverage of this one in particular, and in direct proportion to its quality, it just feels wrong. But in order to really understand it, we have to answer a few crucial questions.
Aww. Oh my gosh, he's dreaming. Hey, wait a minute. What's so great about a dog anyways? Boggs, on the other hand, underrated.
Part 1. What is a Fungie? Premiering last year on HBO Max, The Fungies is a relatively new Cartoon Network project created by Stephen P. Neary, the former showrunner of Clarence for most of its run. The series is a lush fusion of childhood memories and prehistoric inspirations. Man was literally researching 500 million-year-old fungus one night and has interwoven a kooky world full of that stuff, anthropomorphized to the max, and running amongst dinosaurs. Initially titled The Fancies, the series touched down as a pilot in 2018, getting greenlit for a full run a year later. The series at large focuses on a little 10-year-old fungi named Seth, a kid fascinated with the various spheres of scientific interest. In and around Fungi Town, he's at the center of a ton of major occurrences with his older brother Pascal, his mom Nancy, and his younger twin brothers not too far behind. Science of all types fascinates him, and usually his thirst for knowledge leads him into conflict with the rest of the Fungi clan. Despite his complex machinations, he normally makes the best of it. He's learning, in the end, how to balance out his zest for discovery with his appreciation for the people around him. Thematically, the series juggles a lot. Seth, and by proxy the show, are highly involved with the world around them. The way he rattles off ecological facts is practically comes second nature to him. When he takes his discoveries to the rest of civilization, many of his pursuits become drawn-out case studies or dramatic battles of will. He gets to learn about and adapt to people's feelings and how to live peacefully with his clan while advancing his own scientific progression. Part science lesson, part therapy session. He can be a bit overbearing at times. I mean, he's only 10 after all, but he's deftly figuring out when to pace himself and put others' needs before his own. As a concept, The Fungies is derivative of a specific group of shows. You know the ones, those shows from the 80s and 90s centered around a gang of creatures that are usually close to nature and have their own secluded civilization. I've seen properties like the Smurfs and the Fraggles cited directly in interviews and such, and while not as mellow, I felt like it also aligned with the aesthetic of the Moomin in some way. The adventures embarked on take up a lot of space, and even though they may encompass peak oddities or stark dangers, you're there for the interpersonal bits. The vibe of the series is pretty multifaceted, It being a Cartoon Network property, I can imagine it being eyeballed for that 6 to 11 demographic, but it's also just really strong family viewing. The Fungies handles its world and its players in a mature fashion, but the nature of it being really soft and comfy would attract a younger crowd in theory. Stronger secondary personalities are probably going to draw in older folks, while kids proper get dragged along for Seth's journeys. It's not something I'd consider juvenile, more just extremely naturalistic. Things just kinda happen, while straightforward on its face, it's often enough an episode will leave you thinking about more. In the context of the character work, they're more than enough to pique curiosity and carry hype. Based on such a description, you could probably tell how important the character interaction is to the appeal of the show. Here, while the ensemble is not as strong a unit, the united atmosphere of the environment is still super important. Sometimes the occasional adventure can often feel like Seth versus the world, but more often he's just navigating issues through a more neutral lens. Every mundane happening is another chance for a good thought experiment. The dude gives me major middle child energy. He's not really overshadowed by his siblings, but his persistent and enterprising spirit usually buys him into more trouble than out. It'd be easy for him and his antics to grate on you, but it's well established that he's still a pretty compassionate soul who cares for others. Some of his most telling moments as a character stem from him coming back down to Earth and responding to various sociological needs.
This is all my fault. I should have been more honest with you instead of letting things pile up. You're not a bad roommate. I'm a bad brother.
While he serves as an effective moral compass at points, Pascal is a bit too sensitive and cautious to keep up with the chaos. More often, he gets roped into stuff, but the way he and Seth bounce off each other is really earnest and a strong dynamic indeed. He's strong in a different way. In a slightly different timeline, I could easily see Pascal being the main character of the show instead, but not without Seth in tow. They're kind of like two halves of one whole perspective. They represent the constant push and pull that sets this show into motion. Unexpectedly, the rest of the town is also capable of tempering this budding explorer. His classmates provide a great contrast of heads to bounce off of while not usurping his place. Some had more major appearances than others, but everyone fits into their spot. In contrast, residents of Outer Fungi Town tend to stand out more despite having more reserved personalities. We see a lot of Sir Tree, a stumpy little fellow sitting on top of a cliff overlooking the town. He's pretty soft-spoken, but he always has something to offer. Pam the dinosaur is a super intriguing character who definitely would have been my favorite if we had a few more episodes with her off the bat. She's a lizard-brained survivalist who makes time to entertain Seth's wiles. She's not as well-read as he is, but he still has a lot to learn from her. Their scenes feel so organic. It feels like we absorb their interactions through osmosis. Commander Beefy and his whole extraterrestrial consort were a fascinating wild card to throw into the mix. His quick, slick schmoozing style really rolls along the more quaint feel of the town. Seth's futile efforts to connect with Beefy are intriguing to see out in real time.
That's the exact thing I want. Like, just the other day, I was exploring and I found these rocks.
You do you, Seth, my man.
I think of the main cast, I'm really digging the constant trade-off between two of Seth's classmates, Nevin and Lil Lemon. Early on, they gave him some heavy Walter and Perry vibes, but seeing how they work in more independent scenarios made me confident that they were top-tier characters in their own right. Both of them have their moments, but their dynamic is rock solid. Nevin, the taller and more outwardly neurotic of the two, seems to respond more to ideas and concepts, while Lil Lemon, a more reserved force, tends to get hung up on tangible actions and people. They both have their moments, mostly when the other is threatened, but they process things very differently, and it's not lost on us despite them being symbiotic. It's just one of the many tidbits that gives you pause in this place. Within the wider sphere of the Fungies, it leaves a lot for you to discover yourself. The world of the Fungies is really vast and whimsical, and it's easy to get lost in things. There's depth to everything, even if it takes a minute to really get it. When thinking back to the humor, I was fairly close to talking about how it doesn't have a traditional comedic setup, and then I realized that some of my favorite line reads are in the second episode, and I really had to put that thought to bed.
I'm painting you a surprise get well card. Oh man.
There's no time. Pascal, take my eye.
Okay.
The comedy is heavily character adjacent. It really depends on them. to carry the funny, whether in action or in dialogue. Everyone in this small town is pretty familiar with each other. It doesn't take that much for them to get into the banter. It's a thing you have to give a little room as it processes. It's a bit more low-key than you'd expect. It doesn't hit you with quips every few seconds, but when a nugget of gold is unearthed, it'll hang there for a while. I really appreciate seeing it. Its more biting moments were not something you could divine from watching the fancies.
Are they wizards?
Out of this triad of Cartoon Network properties, the Fungies stayed closest to its original concept by far. As such, the reliance on pure character is still vital, but they made more space for them to give us something different here. Speaking of which, I really wanted to dish about the music. The main composer from Clarence, Simon Panrucker, was carried over into this project. The extended theme for the Fungies was released a couple weeks ago, and I would say that it was pretty much instrumental in pushing me to finally sit down and watch the show. It's such a positive vibe, and it's super energized. I love it. In a world where 20-second theme songs are really common, this song was given real legs to hang with you indefinitely. It's no wonder the EP was released separately. It's a straight-up banger. Panrucker's work on the previous show was damn near legendary. It really got into the kid punk aesthetic and expanded the range of the work. To that end, you can feel the 80s vibe just bleed into everything throughout. Every once in a while, Seth and Pascal might have a little ditty to perform, but a lot of the background tracks are suited to montages. It almost dates the series in a really good way. If you really think about it, the show doubles as a covert Clarence reunion. Not only do they share a glut of returning guest stars and crew members, but they both carry a few elements and themes. The importance of the class ensemble, the atmospheric background design, the energetically eccentric soundtrack. Childhood discovery is obviously a winning motif, but how it's executed is what differentiates them so well. Clarence seems to overextend itself to show off the hyper-stylized, surrealist minds of the kids we were following. Here, the Fungies espouses a lot of the same moralistic but tangible wisdom that his theoretical forefathers could. Back then, we were gifted fantastical avenues to see through grounded characters, while in the present, the Fungies gives us grounded avenues to view fantastical characters. More likely, you know somebody that could occupy the spot of Claudette or Pam or Beefy, and while more imaginative in approach, it never loses sight of its values and motivations. There's just so much to love here. I love the prehistoric environment. I love the adventures they embark on. I love these wild hand-painted background gags. Hell, I love the regular gags they sneak in. I love the wholesome vibe. I love that these goofs can heap metric tons of affection and love on each other and not have it feel superfluous. I love that Nikki Yang gets a role in half the modern Cartoon Network continuity. I love that this show feels like something you could watch on Boomerang back in the day. I love how you get to brush up on life science knowledge so casually. I love how naturalistic the approach is. I love that Seth wasn't just like a persona, that's like some guy's voice. That probably sounds like a knock, but that's still really cool. Like, that's just some guy's voice. That's crazy. I love this world. I love these characters. I love this show. Why doesn't everyone else?
The bog is beautiful and complicated. It's not desperate for attention.
What are you talking about, Seth? Maybe this is a bad time.
No, please. I need this.
Part 2. Where is a Fungie? The Fungies has been able to present us with a vast world and a colorful cast. It's hard to really describe, but it definitely has the appeal to carry it forward. There's a lot to say, but there's not many others to speak to about it. Part of the reason why the show has fallen so far under the radar at this point could likely be tied back into its inclusion on HBO Max. Not its inclusion by itself, but the domination of it in its release cycle. The Fungies landed on the service August 20th, 2020. It delivered half of its 40-episode season then, and the other half in October, with another batch billed as Season 2 dropping a good 8 months after the fact. By the time it got its green light, this AT&T merger was probably already solidified, but I get the sense that this was more or less destined to end up on the actual channel slate. The Fungies actually started airing on Cartoon Network earlier this month, but it was placed in a fatal spot. Friday and Saturday mornings at 8. No reruns, no encore presentations, just a handful of episodes from Season 1A, airing wedged between Gumball and Teen Titans Go reruns. It got a better hand than Summer Camp Island did, I guess, preceding it by a year but having its seasons burned off in full day-long marathons and practically nothing else. Even still, Tig and Seek got no dice on linear TV. Internationally speaking, the former two have consistent runs throughout Europe, Africa, and Asia Pacific at least, but the choice to leave them behind and benched on home court is baffling at the very least. Contrary to what's being communicated, there is plenty of content in streaming that slips right through the cracks. Binge culture and the like has exacerbated the touch-and-go nature of creating content just for this arena, but its tangible effects have consequences, even for popular or successful series. Nowadays, you get to see a handful of series released on a weekly basis as opposed to a regular batch format. Usually reserved for big-ticket serialized items, it's easy to make a case for this form of release, as it maintains hype and prolongs the discussion of seasons as they come. Intrepid reboots like Voltron Legendary Defender and She-Ra and the Princesses of Power had super intense, highly mobilized fan bases, but both shows seemed to fizzle out as fast as they ignited, both finishing their long, complex sagas in about 2 years or so, give or take. This would probably not be a widely accepted theory, but I'm sure the courtesy should be extended to more than just a significant few. The circumstances are extenuating, and it's likely, if not evident, that these 3 shows in particular got caught in the middle of some very big changes out of their control. These mergers and executive shuffling seem to benefit consumers in direct proportion to how it fares for the creatives. Sure, you get more wacky crossovers and intriguing multiverse collections, but for those in the field actually experiencing them, it can seriously complicate their process. Of the little marketing each in this unfortunate triad copped, their trailers really ran the gamut.
Seth is always ready for adventure, using his special talents.
Fungi Extendor!
I didn't know you could do that.
Like, I don't think it's incorrect to suggest that the Fungies will cop the attention of kids and their families, but for such an insightful series, its trailer didn't really get to showcase its other sides like it did with the other two. I wouldn't care as much if it was native to the channel where it could grow organically, even if it didn't become a smash. At least it'd be more likely to catch some eyes. As far as pure character design goes, The Fungies is probably one of the most visually distinct shows they've got at the moment. The style is definitely more of the same, but you've not seen characters like these occupy that space in a minute. Like just think about it for a moment. What we got here? We got kids, more kids, food that acts like kids, kids we used to know as teenagers, teenagers that act like kids, and then you got these. Look at these. What the hell are these? I'll admit, if we gave every streaming IP a weekly release, it'd become much harder to track anything, really. I just don't like the assumption that the binge format will fly with every episodic comedy is getting real airtime. For these 3, I think they at least deserve some linear airtime for a few solid months. That doesn't mean they'll all hit equally with the audience, but hey, at least they actually got a chance to spread out and find themselves. It's a concept that's practically native to Fungi culture anyway. You gotta make good on the lore. It's just inherent. Part 3. Why is a Fungi? At its core, the Fungies is about the push and pull of social interaction, the ebb and flow of progression and familiarity, being able to fit into the capital structure while being uncompromised and unequivocally you. It wouldn't be the first cartoon to do so, but as of now, I think it's one of the most satisfying I've seen in a long while. Its outer connections to its unofficial predecessor Clarence makes up only one part of the Fungi DNA, but its thematic similarities really struck a chord with me in a way I didn't expect. Back in my day, you could still watch the Smurfs and Johnny Bravo on the same network. It was very much cool to push more goofy comedies to the side. It was probably a response from the mid to late 2000s when said comedy seemed to dominate, but it didn't make it any less destructive. In that era, there was a wild contingent of folks who vehemently rejected these as they came for less than coherent reasons. They had their own style and their own merits, but because they didn't share the same goals or tone as some of the most popular, They were automatically garbage for being just a bit out there, a touch weird, a tad closer to okay than they expected. The existence of okay is sorely undervalued nowadays. All that's seen is that it's not quite good, and that's all she wrote. In reality, there's plenty of shades to okay, like decent or solid, balanced or unexciting, boring or drab. Okay doesn't usually reflect a bad show. More often, it probably means it stands on stable ground, but it doesn't stretch beyond itself in a very obvious way. If not for nothing, it can align with the default, but it never occurs to folks that okay can simply mean amazing in its own way. In a more traditional sense, many others can start off okay with an unassuming premise and get props later on for being authentic. Last I checked, we had a show on Fox just like that, and last I saw of it, it's been eaten. I made its own case a while ago, and seeing it play to everything, literally everything I said it would, it truly hits different. In a way, the streaming wars, among other things, seem to have made it not okay for things to simply just be okay. Many things start out as such, maybe even worse, but the expectations are higher now. Standards have been set by really competitive series for our time, and while we have arguably more genre diversity than ever before, it's also much easier to separate the heavyweights from the perceived duds. In the context of animation, we've got a long way to go. I think things have gotten better, but there's still a wide discrepancy in how people see these shows. It's easy to get othered if you're not of a certain type, even though it takes all types to help build this city from the ground up. The Fungies and its ilk are probably more emblematic of Cartoon Network on the whole than the more popular Renaissance-era hits. As scrappy underdogs squeezing their way into the wider animation sphere, their stories are practically parallel to a degree. They're a little weird, a little more different. It catches you a bit off guard, but that's exactly what exemplifies what makes them so great. You probably didn't notice, but each transitionary clip was taken from a different bit of just the second episode of this series, Sick Day. It's a pretty standard premise to run with, and it's well in keeping with what you'd expect from these characters, but the last 3 minutes or so was really a turning point for me. It didn't leave me with the deepest revelations or change me fundamentally as a person, but the last few actions that took place was an explosive microcosm within that story itself. It was so simple and yet so powerful, this back and forth play out between Seth and this literal dog. It's true that Cartoon Network is in a really weird spot right now. I've had a time trying to compartmentalize my own feelings on it. It's hard to stay positive, just to be real. I think mistakes were made and we're in a transitional period can coexist within their own spaces. They're both accurate to a degree, but the audience side of it adds another layer to things. The idea that a thing is invalid just because it's not the next Adventure Time or Steven Universe is wildly elitist, and it's a tack that's traveled far because it's been given a lot of credence. Nobody thinks about support structures, the series around keeping the vibe and atmosphere trucking along, and can draw in the other side of folks who just want to chill out. Any show can really build on its world and its characters, but series that really own that and inspire otherworldly greatness from it are truly diamonds in the rough. Normally being okay is just fine. Knowing okay, in an extraordinary sense, is an insanely important draw by itself. The Fungies is many things. It's as atmospherically relaxed as it is emotionally intense. It's comedically satisfying and visually gorgeous. It's as snappy as it is soft. But most tantamount in this case, it's underappreciated. And that probably shouldn't be the case. In the grand scheme of things, I don't know if this piece did much to change that. I just wanted to heap the same love on it that it offers in exchange for your time. This thing was made from the ground up to feel like a warm hug. It would be wild to leave it hanging like that. If you feel the same way, I think you have an idea where to look for it. Season 1 and 2A are hanging on HBO Max. It was trending sometime this week, so kindly give it a boost if you could. If you detest the concept of sleep, catch it on Friday and Saturday mornings on the channel. If you're outside of the States, you'll find it airing much more consistently there or wherever Cartoon Network shows are found. I'll leave up a list of some of the better starting points for the show. Consider them the fungiest of the fungi so far. I recommend watching 1 to 3 episodes at a time. just to keep up with that 80s aesthetic. I'm sure we'll likely have more of the show touch down sometime before the year ends, but we've got literally dozens of episodes to tide you over until then. No matter how you end up feeling about it, give it the Fungi Town treatment. You'll feel more at home if you embrace the vibe.